The players are ready to go. We've got Vladislav, Artemiev, Magnus, Carlsen. That's the action that we will be following. Magnus, how angry is he right now, David?
He will be furious with himself because it was all self-inflicted. He allowed all those tactics to happen. He allowed the momentum to drift against him, and he made the blunder at the end. So he knows that he only has himself to blame, but 3 games left today, he still has enough time, for sure, to fight back. And, okay, early days, Vladislav Artemiev, he does tend to dodge the main lines, to dodge anything too direct in the opening, especially with white. And by developing with the Reti kind of English opening setup, he's very flexible. I'm not sure what setup he'll choose, but Magnus, either way, getting ready to play the King's Indian or the Grunfeld, very dynamic openings. And he might want to strike back with black, but the main thing for Magnus is not to lose. He needs to stay in this match and take his moment to strike a bit later on in the day. Meanwhile, he's kept all the pieces on the board. It's unlikely we will see too many trades this early in the game. We see the pawns kind of not facing off against each other anytime soon. There won't be open lines, open diagonals. But Artemiev also choosing the flexible approach. And we're going to see a double fianchetto from both sides. Yeah. Both sides putting all of their bishops on the long diagonals. And the tension will be postponed to the middle game.
Speaking of Chessable here, I mean, this is actually straight from the Chessable course. The one that it is the Grunfeld Part 2, in fact, from Peter Svidler. He actually recommends the double fianchetto versus the double fianchetto. Like, that's exactly what he likes to do. Now, of course, in this situation here, Black's actually plans are C5 and play D5 right after. Now, of course, Magnus being a part of Chessable, you remember his face was on the Chessable screen many times for the people that are Chessable users. And you see Magnus up there when you created an account. Definitely, Magnus is a big fan of Chessable, has his own courses there, too, as well. But these lines are very, very good. C5 and D5 are actually what Peter Svidler recommends in these situations, just to make things dynamic and try to get something to play for on the board.
Now, when we think about David playing for a win in a position, Magnus's position is looking a bit too cagey, but is this just him keeping as many pieces on the board, as much tension on the board?
Yeah, I think that's conventional chess wisdom if you're in a must-win situation. Magnus isn't quite there yet, but he will want to win. Then keep pieces on the board, as you say, Tanya. Just give your opponent as many options as possible, because the more alternatives you give them, the more options, the more likely it is they'll go wrong. That being said, white has done nothing wrong, of course, here. White's developed very naturally, so it will be later in the game that Magnus is going to try and provoke those mistakes. But it's by playing weird and wonderful moves like this one, knight to a6, putting a knight on the rim, looks pretty dim. And yeah, it's by playing moves like this that he'll provoke his opponent. He might force Artemiev to get overexcited, and that's where the mistakes will come a bit later. But do we like the look of this one? To me, it just looks a bit too superficial. It looks like provocation for the sake of provocation, not actually improving Black's position. James, thoughts on this?
Wow, lots has happened. The center, it's a completely open game, very different from how it started.
Very, very different. I just want to note that Lam Lei and Fabian Caruana, they're knotted up 1-1. They drew their game. But in this one, I mean, the eval bar may say it's a level position, but it's not equal. It's not a draw. Look at the dynamics here. Black at some point can strike with those pawns. They're quite advanced. White's pieces don't pass his own 3rd rank, and the eval bar says, yeah, who cares? It's just a level game right now. So I think both sides will have their chances. Magnus has to be careful not to press too soon. That can backfire. But for Artemiev, he needs to find a plan.
Yeah, so for example, if the pawn disappears, so what? These 2 white A pawns, they're basically equivalent to 1. You might well move your knight out the way. I'm not sure which direction you go, back or forward. But now Black has a pass pawn of his own, as Robert mentions. And Magnus will hope to get this one motoring down the board later.
How surprised are you with what just happened?
We all are. I mean, taking on F6, giving up the bishop pair?
Just action replay here. He took this knight.
Whoa.
Top grandmasters, they love their bishops. There has to be a reason behind this one. This shows no bias at all. It looks like that bishop was the glue holding White's position together. But he's removed the black knight from the game, maybe in fear of the knight jumping forward. And only now has he taken this pawn. But these look so much weaker now. The rook's going to go for it later on. Suddenly, this black c-pawn is going to start rolling. I've got to say, advantage Magnus Carlsen, at least in practical terms.
And the clock. I mean, practical terms, look at Artemiev's clock. Down to 14 seconds left. I mean, he has to move, and it's not going to be easy. Just because there aren't too many pieces on the board does not make this an easy situation. And the eval bar keeps getting lower and lower. The bishop pair will flex its muscles.
Absolutely. It was a time issue here. I think that bishop F6 move was like, oh, I got 4 seconds, make a move. And then he made a move. And, of course, the time, as I like to say, is you have to use the time as a piece as well. You get 16 pieces, but that 17th one is the clock. And if you're not using it correctly, then you are going to start making mistakes in time trouble, as you see Artemiev doing right now.
Yeah, but it is bizarre because Artemiev, I've never, well, very rarely at least, seen him make these kind of bad strategic decisions, but giving up the bishop pair for no compensation at all, That's an odd one. Normally he makes decisions that are very well grounded in a positional sense, and now Magnus is going for those weak pawns. Those two white A pawns, they're doomed. They're going to fall off the board in the next few moves.
It's a wrap.
Yeah, and it's all about whether white can contain the black pawn.
Flank shoot! Man.
And that's a bad move. It's apparently a big blunder. And you just take on a4. The D pawn, you can stop it, but you never want to block a pawn with a piece. You want to block with a knight. But if you block with a knight, it's going to get pinned. There's back rank problems as well. I think this position is miserable for Artemiev, and he doesn't even have time to think of his next two moves.
Is rook c1 just coming in, pinning that knight? Bishop g5, advance the d pawn. That pawn's queening. The a4 bishop defends that d1 square. This looks absolutely busted for Artemiev. Can he actually go d3 here? Can he start pushing the d pawn, David?
About to say.
Yes, Tanya.
Yes.
I think that's one of multiple winning moves here. The black light square bishop can also drop back, hit that white rook in the center, but you're right. You called it. And this looks like it's walking into trouble, this move.
You can't play that, bro.
Yeah, the two white rooks are both on dark squares. Black has a dark squared bishop. There must be a knockout blow right now.
I'm not sure which diagonal to use. I can attack both your rooks. I can attack your rook from every angle that I want. And that's what happens when you give up a dark square bishop. He goes straight into d4. He's attacking the rook on e3. He's trying to kick it away from this passed pawn on d3. If the rook slides over, then knight loses defender. If the rook goes up the board, then the problem is the d3 pawn is safe and sound, and that black bishop will likely go into c3 next. I feel like white is about to lose material and the game, and Magnus is going to be right back in this match, not up 1-1.
And you're right, Robert. Actually, Vladislav didn't even struggle on. He resigned.
He hit the resi button. He hit the button.
Yeah, we're tied 1-1. Magnus strikes back.